Hello, this is Ted Warner with the Texas Library Association, and I want to welcome everyone attending today's webinar, Get Global with Your Collection Development, International Literature for K-12 Readers, we are very privileged to have Dr. Nancy Hadaway as our speaker today. This program was given at the 2013 TLA conference in Fort Worth, but we are privileged to hear this encore presentation today. And Dr. Hadaway, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much, Ted, and welcome. I appreciate your taking the time to learn more about some outstanding international books. Um, I'm going to talk about the United States Board on Books for Young People and the outstanding international book list that they began several years ago. And the committee selects an annual list of outstanding books for K-12. And the books are originally published outside the United States, and then they're either published in the United States, or a few of them are published simultaneously outside the United States and in the United States in the same year. And the first list came out in 2006, and so we'll be coming up on 10 years soon. And the goals are to counteract cultural stereotypes and bridge cultural gaps and to build connections. And international literature is somewhat different than multicultural literature. In general, when we're talking about multicultural literature, we're talking about literature that addresses cultural groups within the United States, for instance, Asian Americans, African Americans, Native Americans. Um, and international literature is different because it's addressing individuals and countries and geographic regions outside the United States. It can be written by authors who are currently residing in the United States who have cultural roots outside the United States. Um, we probably don't have as much international literature in libraries and schools as multicultural literature. We've made some good strides in increasing the number of multicultural books in our collections. And sometimes teachers or librarians may be reluctant to use international books. First, there is a limited availability of international literature. When USBBY started the Outstanding International Book List in 2006, they received really a small number of submissions, but that's grown each year. And because of that lack of international literature, sometimes librarians and educators really don't have as much awareness of authors and titles and themes. We're fairly familiar with American authors, but there are authors who are just as famous in New Zealand or in um, England as our American authors. And then sometimes educators are really concerned about straying from the prescribed curriculum or the canon. And we find that really a strong sentiment among secondary teachers or educators and librarians. But as you at the end, I'll show you the USBBY site. Each year there's a bookmark with the books leveled by grades, which is a kind of a general flexible leveling. And there's also at the end, in parentheses, the country that or the region that the story takes place. One really easy way for teachers to connect with international literature is to simply pair it with the classics or the prescribed curriculum. And here are some easy pairings of books that librarians typically have within the collection, or that teachers use as a part of the prescribed curriculum. For instance, Anne Frank, The Diary of a Young Girl, is commonly used in middle schools, and there are many, many companion books to Anne Frank. Um, but the Anne Frank, Her Life in Words and Pictures, um, provides a lot of background from archives that have been drawn from the Anne Frank house. Arthurian legends are common focus in the curriculum in secondary, and there are a couple of possibilities to pair with those. Philip Reeves' Here Lies Arthur, and then Kevin Crossley Holland's Crossing to Paradise. And Crossing to Paradise is also a great match to Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, because in Crossing to Paradise we have a story of pilgrims who are going on a journey, and a young farm girl is accompanying the pilgrims and has a look at life that she has really never seen before. And fantasy books are very popular in other countries outside the United States. Harry Potter really kind of gave a boost to fantasy, and I think when I was on the committee for the OIB, I got books and books, or boxes and boxes of fantasy, long novels, and the novels of dystopia are particularly popular. And we have the ones that have been in the curriculum for a long time: Brave New World, 1984, Lord of the Flies, and they're easily paired with the Patrick Ness books, The Knife of Never Letting Go or The Ask and the Answer. Those are from the Chaos Walking series, and often the fantasy novels are part of a larger series. And then there's the classic Fahrenheit 451 that could be paired with The Book Thief, and that would be a good pairing these days, since the movie The Book Thief is fairly recent. Perfect pairs are ways of pairing two books that are related: a picture book, an informational book, poetry, other books that might go together. I observed a classroom where the student was teaching Canterbury Tales or other classic literature, and she created stations with picture books or other informational books that were quick reads that students could rotate through to get background information. Kind of an interesting way to get background information before reading a longer work. But you could also pair My Mother's Sari and New Clothes for New Year's Day, about traditional Korean clothing for the new year. Those would be good, a good pairing. And at the secondary level, a pairing might be Web of Lies by Beverly Naidoo. It's the second book that's a sequel to The Other Side of Truth, about Nigerian refugees living in London. And then for middle grades or intermediate grades, Jervali's Journey, a refugee diary about a family fleeing the Congo and making their way to England and waiting for being given refugee status. And the authors that did Jervali's Journey, Robinson and Young, have done two other refugee books: Hamzat's Journey, about a young Chechnyan, and Muhammad's Journey, which is about a Kurdish Iraqi. They're also working on another book that's not a refugee story specifically, but it's about Palestinian children. Text sets are larger collections of books that are conceptually related, and gives students opportunities to read multiple texts, or and also at different reading levels, which would be very helpful given the fact that we do have a lot of diversity in terms of reading ability. And you could get a text set organized by author, such as an author study, by genre or subgenre. for instance, realistic fiction or mystery, by format, diaries and journals, or very popular in young adult literature, alternating voices or multiple narrators. Or you can do a thematic or topical collection on families or death and dying. One thing about international literature, especially young adult books, um, is that they really address controversial topics that we may not address as much in books from U.S. publishing houses. So author studies are great, again, for getting to know authors in other countries. Tim Wynne-Jones is very famous in Canada. He does the Rex Zero series, which is very amusing. It's great for middle schoolers. And he also has one for older readers, A Thief in the House of Memory. Sean Tan is a wonderful illustrator as well as an author, and he's done a series of short stories in Tales from Outer Suburbia, the wordless picture book, The Arrival, which is really an interesting book for older students, and The Immigrant or Foreigner or Alien is an interesting creature, and it's all about his adjustments in a new world. So it's not place specific. And if you're familiar with Sean Tan at all, you may know that he won an Academy Award for an animated film adaptation of his picture book, The Lost Thing. Very talented. One of my personal favorites is Deborah Ellis. She's Canadian, and she does so many things. She's a political activist and a philanthropist, and she's written more than 20 books. She did the Breadwinner series with Parvana, and she has the more recent book that was just on the Outstanding International Book List, My Name is Parvana. And then those are all fiction. And she's also done, though, a series of nonfiction books, Kids of Kabul, about young children in Afghanistan in war times. She's also done Voices of Soldiers' Children, which would be a great book to have on hand for if you were in general, but if you were living in a military community. And Margaret Mahy is a really renowned New Zealand author. She recently passed away, but she's probably their most acclaimed children's writer. And she's written more than 120 titles, both picture books as well as books for older readers. And those are just a few of hers that have made the Outstanding International Book List. Nikki Daly is from South Africa, and he has, again, garnered quite a few honors in South Africa, and he's done mainly picture books. Ruby Sings the Blues, a traditional tale, a twist on the Red Riding Hood. It's a tale from Ghana, Pretty Salma. And The Herd Boy is a recent book that won the 2013 IBI South Africa Award. You could, as well as doing an author study and getting to know authors from other countries and their works, you could gather books along genre lines. There probably are not as many nonfiction titles in the Outstanding International Book List, but there are usually a few every year. Several that are popular. The Flags of the World is a beautiful illustrated book that addresses the different flags from different countries with information about each. Seahorse, The Shyest Fish in the Sea is a wonderful nonfiction book. And Arctic Adventures introduces you to different Inuit artists and their lives, stories from their lives, and then short biographies as well as photos of their artwork. And again, just like with nonfiction, there are a few poetry books in the Outstanding International Books each year. Both poetry for young readers as well as poetry for young adults. Arroz con leche, or rice pudding, is by Jorge Argueta. He has done a series now of at least 3 recipe poems. And this was his second that was on the Outstanding International Book list. And Bananas in My Ears is on the 2013 Outstanding book list, and it's riddles and poems. And then Stephen Herrick is an Australian author who has done a series of verse novels. And By the River and Cold Skin. And Cold Skin is a verse novel written from multiple perspectives, multiple narrators. Basically, a young girl is found dead, and through the inner voices of various narrators, you get clues to the individual who is the murderer. So young adult books. Traditional literature, always a popular choice, and it gives you insights into different geographic regions, different countries, and there are usually a few traditional literature options on each Outstanding International Book list. A Fistful of Pearls, Tales from Iraq. The Great Snake are tales from the Amazon region, and I mentioned before Nikki Daley's Pretty Salma, which is a traditional twist to the Red Riding Hood story from Ghana. And Mayan and the Magic Serpent is by Baba Wage Jakati, and he was originally from Mali, and that's an interesting folk tale from that region. Fantasy is very popular, as I mentioned. Probably more fantasy titles in the international scene, maybe even in the US. Neil Gaiman, who is well known, and has the Graveyard Book, which was on the Newbery list. The Swan Kingdom is Zoe Marriott used Hans Christian Andersen, The Wild Swans, as an inspiration, but it's a freestanding tale, all her own. And then Nahoka Uehashi from Japan has done a couple of books from this Moribito series. And in fact, Uehashi, I just got an email, was awarded the Hans Christian Andersen Award, which is like the little Nobel Prize. And that's awarded by IBI, the International Board on Books for Young People. So perhaps focusing on those books would be interesting because of recently being awarded the Hans Christian Andersen. Fiction and mystery. Mystery is always popular, and there are mysteries on the OIB list for all ages. Adeline is a popular character, and in this one, it's like a graphic book, not necessarily a graphic novel, but pictures take a lot of the place of text in the book, and Adeline solves mysteries, and written for intermediate, probably grades. The London Eye Mystery is a really good book. young children or youngsters go on the London Eye, and when they come down, one of their cousins is missing. And what's nice about this one is there's a young boy that is active in the solving of the mystery that has Asperger's syndrome. The Falconer's Knot, Mary Hoffman, who was the author, became very popular of the Stravaganza series. She um, bases this in Italy, and its subtitle is A Story of Friars, Flirtation, and Foul Play. So it's quite an exciting mystery for young adults. Historical fiction is very popular. I really liked Escape by the Sea. An incredible, strong heroine swinging from the mast on the sailing ship. And it's about the Punic Wars, so a long time ago, in ancient Carthage, the war between Rome and Carthage, and a young girl as the heroine. And The Blood Red Horse is a part of the Granville trilogy, and it's about the Crusades. And so both of those would be good for young adults. You could also group your books according to the format. As I mentioned before, that arroz con leche, the Jorge Argueta, was a recipe poem, and he's done at least three. Sopa de frijoles, bean soup, was his first, and it was on the OIB list several years ago, back probably in 2009. Arroz con leche was his second, and recently, this past year in 2013, it wasn't on the OIB list, but it was on the NCTE Poetry Award list, was Tamalitos, or Little Tamales. And all of them are written in kind of a step-by-step sequential pattern, following a recipe. And What Should I Make is a great book because it's from India. We don't get many of those. And it's a fun book where a young boy is in the kitchen with his mom, and she's making traditional chapati bread. And it really is a great book, especially for ESL students because of the language. It's very straightforward. Another format that's a possibility is Meerkat Mail. Emily Gravett is a British author, and she's extremely well known, and has won many awards. And Sonny becomes very bored with the Kalahari Desert and with his relatives, and so he decides to go on the road and visit other relatives. And he writes postcards from different geographical locations. They're real geographical locations, but obviously, because of the personification of the meerkat, this is fiction. But it's a really fun story. And then diaries, and I mentioned before the Robinson and Young having three of these refugee diary stories, probably for intermediate to middle school. And then another book that's in diary format, The Diary of Ma Wan. And it's about a young Chinese girl who really wants an education and all that she has to go through in order to acquire that education. It's drawn actually from her own three different diaries. As I mentioned before, multiple narrators or alternating narrators is a very popular format. Sometimes, as in Coalskin, it's multiple narrators, many voices. And Coalskin is from World War II Australia, a very poor mining town, and a murder that's occurred there. The Girl Who Saw Lions is a wonderful book. two voices, two alternating narrators, a young girl in England whose mom is a single mom, and Rosa's mother decides that it would be good to perhaps bring another child into their home, to adopt a child who was in need. And Abela is a young orphan from Africa whose mother has died of AIDS and is being taken care of by an unscrupulous uncle. So you have the two girls with very different lives and their viewpoints juxtaposed in alternating chapters. And News from the Dead is a very interesting book for probably high school readers. A young servant girl in 1650 in England is hung for killing her child, but actually she has a miscarriage. It's the child is stillborn. But on the autopsy table, she's laid out. They are thinking that after the hanging that she's dead, but actually you first hear the voices in Mary's head, and so she's not actually dead. But a young surgeon is going to perform the autopsy, and so suddenly he realizes that she's not dead. So you get alternating voices of the servant girl who was hung and this surgeon, and you get some interesting viewpoints and information about science and medicine in 1600s in England. Different formats. The Strongest Man in the World is a fictionalized conversation between a father who is a strong man and his daughter. And it's a picture book biography. And Tiger Moon is a beautiful story within a story, very reminiscent of Scheherazade, where a young bride who is unable to escape a forced marriage, and she's awaiting her wedding night, makes friends with a young servant and tells him a story of a young boy who comes to the rescue of a specific situation. And it's so that story within a story, you get a lot of background on the history and culture of India. And so it's a beautiful book, beautiful language, and a lot of interesting culture. Bilingual books, very popular, good to have a good bilingual collection. You can have interlingual books, which just have foreign language words interspersed in English text. What the Rat Told Me is about the Chinese zodiac with words in Chinese. I'm Different, Can You Find Me has words in 16 different languages, and it's really a puzzle book. And dual language books where you have the full text of the story in two languages. And Alego is in Inuktitut. It's about a young girl and her grandmother going to collect clams to make clam soup on Baffin Island. And Indebted as Lord Cham is in Vietnamese and English. Wordless books come in some different formats, from partially wordless, like this Bob Graham book. He's one of my favorite authors. Has just maybe a sentence, to whole pages that have a series of graphics that are wordless, but you can follow the action, and they're great for building oral language. To books that are almost wordless, like In the Town All Year Round, which has 4 seasons. It has an introduction page to the season with a few words, and then wordless pages following after that. And then, as I mentioned before, a wordless picture book about immigration and adjustments in The Arrival by Sean Tan. Parallel illustrations. This is a fun book for young children. Minji's mom goes to a salon, and so you see her mother's traditional salon visit. But at home, Minji's doing a pretend imagination salon with the dog. The poor dog is having to deal with the salon. And then the graphic novel Kampung Boy is is about Lat. He's a Muslim boy that's growing up in rural Malaysia, and it's a very popular book in Southeast Asia. You can gather books by theme, um, and as I mentioned, many international books deal with really controversial, hard topics. Death and Dying, Ways to Live Forever, a book aimed at young boys. And this is a young boy that's dying of leukemia. And Would You is really a powerful tale about a young girl whose sister simply stepped off a curb and was hit by a car and is on life support, and all the feelings of the family and especially the young narrator. And then I mentioned before, News from the Dead, interesting perspectives about medicine and dying. Obviously, families are different all over the world and across the United States. And so it's good to have a collection about different kinds of families. Um, My Two Grannies is a really sweet book. It's a picture book about a bicultural, biracial child. One grandmother's from the UK and one grandmother's from Trinidad. And her grannies get to take care of the little girl, and they kind of fight over her in terms of wanting to be the favorite. Home Now is about a young girl who's orphaned. Her mom dies from AIDS, and she goes to live with an aunt, and she becomes friends with a little orphan elephant at a game refuge near where she lives. Being Bee is about a young girl whose mom has passed away and her dad is single, but her dad begins to date again, and his girlfriend moves in, and she has all the adjustments to that. And young children dealing with parents with um, mental illness issues are depicted in Pieces of Me and The Illustrated Mum. And then My Mom is just a sweet book by Anthony Brown, very famous British author, about a fun mom and interactions with her child. War, lots of books about children in conflict or different wars across the world. The Donkey of Gallipoli is actually a picture book for intermediate grades. It could even go into the middle school. That is about World War I in Turkey. Lugobanda is a really interesting book. It's actually the oldest known written story, and it's about ancient Iraq and a story of war. Daughter of War is about Armenian genocide in 1915, and Hitler's Canary is about the German invasion of Denmark. So lots of options there. Two popular books that are more recent by Elizabeth Wine, Codename Verity was on the 2013 OIB list, and Rose Under Fire. And they're about female aviators or that are helping out in England and then are captured and have to deal with concentration camps in Germany. Very powerful stories. And then, as I mentioned before, Deborah Ellis has a series of books about children in war, and The Kids of Kabul is one about young children in Afghanistan. Lots of ways to help teachers use literature or for you to spotlight literature in the libraries. You can focus on the format that I mentioned before. For instance, the recipe books by Argueta or others, and children could create illustrated steps or written instructions and then share these with their peers to determine if instructions make sense. It's not always easy to write instructions that make sense to others. And again, the how-to instructions, some books for those would be Sopa de Frijoles or What Should I Make? That little book from India. Postcards are great. One of my favorite books, it's not an OIB book, was Postcards from Pluto about books in the solar system. And so Meerkat Mail also uses postcards as a great short writing. You could also use the book about the different Inuit artists to do as a model mentor text for many biographies, or the flag book, again, to write either bulleted information or short paragraphs about different flags. Or you could do books about different animals using the seahorse as a mentor text. Students could, again, write their own recipe poems, or they could collect families, like family stories behind the recipes, like the Alego book about the grandmother and her daughter going clam hunting. And you could collect those recipe books in a class library or in the big library. And actually, student-produced books sometimes are so popular with other students. You could also use books about journeys, and you could map the geographic setting of those books. That would be a good display in a library or in a classroom as a way to teach geography and mapping skills. And there are a variety of books about real geographic locations, like the Robinson and Young Refugee Diary Stories, Yervali's Journey, Hamzat's or Muhammad's Journey, Meerkat Mail, fiction but about real locations. And these are imagined journeys in space. The Lark Light and Polo eventually goes to space. And then just various adventures across different geographic settings in The Scarecrow and His Servant by Philip Pullman. But if you go to the USBBY website, you'll note that for the 2013 Outstanding International Book List, the committee actually did a graphic where they mapped the location where the different stories took place. So you could do this for any grouping collection of stories. And again, it's a great way to teach geography. You can also do mapping language diversity, keeping a running record of words from a series of books that are bilingual or interlingual. And you could use this chart, pulling the word and noting what book it's from, maybe the page number, what the meaning is, what language that is, and what country. The Legend of the Chinese Dragon is just like, it's by the same author of the Chinese Zodiac book, Marie Cellier. And then Satomi Ichikawa, My Father's Shop, has multilingual, interlingual. And so visitors come to the father's shop from different countries and greet him in different languages. And then the young boy chases a rooster, and then all the visitors share what roosters say in their country and their language. You could also conduct interviews about school and share these, and there are various books on the OIB list. One nonfiction book, Going to School in India. Very interesting in terms of all the places where you might find classrooms, and then fiction books. It happened at school or Once Upon an Ordinary School Day. And then you could interview individuals about school experiences. You could also locate author interviews or author clips on YouTube. And on the handout, I provided a couple of links to an interview with Deborah Ellis and then a book chat with Elizabeth Wine, who wrote Codename Verity and Rose Under Fire. And there are just tons of great book reviews, book trailers on YouTube. And I put several links for the Codename Verity, Rose Under Fire, and then My Name is Parvana. Students are really great with this nowadays. They have a lot of digital expertise, so it's a fun thing for them to do, or you can create one as a way of book talking, because book talking really helps get kids interested in books. Also, you might research and document daily life or special celebrations. Here's a Nikki Daly book, Happy Birthday, Jamila. Actually, the birthday celebration is maybe pretty similar to what we have in the United States. And so you might also collect examples of homes and ways of life from different books and present those through a digital slideshow or poster. And here are several books. One Hen, which is a wonderful book, and the author did have quite an extensive website with different projects. It's about microeconomics, and it's about a young boy. Actually, it's a true story, and their village had micro grants that you could apply for or ask for, and his mom got one, and he came up with the idea of raising hens, and he parlayed that into actually quite an income. And so now he's giving back and paying that forward. My Little House, My Little Round House, actually is a beautiful story about Mongolia and nomadic life, and we don't see a lot of books about that area, and living in the yurt. And the illustrations are just phenomenal in this book, very beautiful. Mia's story is from Chile, and family lives near a garbage dump, and they recycle items from the garbage dump and then sell those items in the market when they go to town. You could also create examples of fashion around the world. And these are the books I mentioned before, My Mother's Sari, and the new clothes for New Year's Day, Korean traditional clothing. And you could also do listening center recordings. And this will be great for some of the rhyming picture books, the two by Margaret Mahy down the back of the chair. And then there's one on the ladder. Or Bubble Trouble is the other one by Margaret Mahy. This is hilarious, so that the baby gets caught up in a bubble and the people are running after trying to get the baby down. Also have guests come in, or students do bilingual or interlingual read-alouds or read-alongs. That's a way of increasing a focus on language diversity and just diversity in general. Books about self-discovery. There are many in the outstanding international book list. Sebastian Roller Skates, about a young boy who's overcoming his fear. And they could write an experience about something that caused personal growth. My Cat Copies Me is a beautiful book from Korea, and a young girl, the cat follows the young girl, but eventually the young girl takes her cue from the cat because the cat goes outside and makes new friends. Ruby Sings the Blues by Nikki Daly from South Africa. How Ruby tames her loud voice and becomes more appropriate. And when I grow up, I will win the Nobel Peace Prize. Young boy learning to behave more appropriately. Lizette's Green Socks, Individualism. You could compare families with graphic organizers such as Venn diagrams, all the different family types from those books that um, we talked about earlier. And this is the USBBY website. As I mentioned before, every year there's a bookmark that you can access that lists the grade level groupings of books with the citation for each book, and at the end, the country, the setting of the book is noted. Um, there used to be a link to the school library journal article every February. An annotation for each of the books is in an article for the school library journal. We're having a little bit of an issue on the website, so just the most recent school library journal article is available. But that's a great website to check out. And again, um, there's other information about the organization and other book projects and international library projects that we're involved in. So right now, that brings me really to the end, and I want to ask if you have any specific questions. I really appreciate, Brandy, you're taking the time to participate. If there aren't any questions, after the handout going over the information that was in the PowerPoint, I also provided a list of the most recent Outstanding International Book List. Those are 2003 published books, but it's called the 2014 list because we announce it every January at ALA Midwinter.
Dr. Hadaway, thank you so much. This was a tremendous presentation, packed with information. And I know the people that watch this webinar will want to add many of these books to their collections to diversify their holdings. We were so lucky to bring you back to do this. I want to thank our audience for making time to stop in today and participate in this webinar, and also welcome all those who will be watching the recording later. We have many other diversity webinars that will be coming up in May of 2014, and I encourage you all to check the TLA website at www.txla.org/CE to see those titles and dates. So again, thank you to our audience, and thank you, Dr. Hadaway, and we wish everyone a good week.